Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Upgame podcast. I am joined this morning by Jamie Mcconnell, PGA professional, director of instruction at the Claude Harmon Performance Academy in Dubai. Good morning, probably afternoon your time, Jamie.
Just tipped into good afternoon for me, but good morning for you.
Yeah. First of all, do you want to give a little background for those who don't know about you?
I suppose I've been teaching, probably coming up on 15 years now. Came from a playing background, as probably most of us have done, a failed playing background in my case. Tried my hand at Europro and Jamaica and PJ regional stuff back in the day. And then ended up in coaching from there. I suppose it was something that I kind of fell into through working in operations, and it was, I suppose, at the beginning an extra income when you're teaching or working in the pro shop, and just kind of fell in love with it. Fell in love with helping people get better and seeing people improve their games and kind of the joy they got from it. And then as it kind of progressed further and further, basically on the more elite end, it almost kind of provides some of the same emotions that you get playing. Except you've just got a lot less control on it. So I think for me, it kind of spiraled from there, and I've worked in Dubai now for about 8 years. Came to the Butch Harmon School of Golf 8 years ago, and then about 2.5 years ago, it switched over just to Claude, his son, and we've continued there ever since. So I've been extremely lucky to work with a wonderful family, first of all, with the Harmons, and then have some really, really good mentors along the way with people like Justin Parsons, who's now in Sea Island, and then Claude and Butch along the way, and they've been super helpful to me in the last few years.
Absolutely, and I think we'll touch on that to start with. Obviously, being able to pick the brains of Butch, Claude, Justin. What have been the key takeaways, learnings from those?
I think the one that stands out. There's probably two phrases that come up quite a lot that stand out. I think it's, there's really no one swing. There's one swing for every person based on what their body's able to do, but it's not a cookie cutter model to help people get better. I think that would be the number one thing that really stands out to me. And then probably don't use anything you can't use on the backline on Sunday is probably number two. And I think that probably tells you an awful lot about the guys and how they teach and why they have so much success with players, is that they try to keep it as simple as possible. They want people to be able to produce results pretty quickly. And really it's completely individual as a sport, that you've got to find what the right thing for that person is. For some people that might be, using technology in a lesson, while for others it might be going straight onto the golf course and just figuring out why they do certain things or how they react to certain situations. I think that's where you've got to be, I suppose, a real coach over a teacher. When you are working for the Harmons, it's all about making the player better, and I think that's the number one rule.
Yeah, fantastic. And obviously, in terms of your stable, you work with junior players right up to players at the very top level. How does that influence how you teach? What's the sort of differences between, obviously, I imagine it's quite different from a stroppy teenager to a tour pro. Maybe not. Maybe the tour pro's as bad as a stroppy teenager in some cases. But how does that?
I think the difference is always expectation. I think it's obviously when you're dealing with the best of the best, there is a huge expectation on results. I think when you're starting with a young junior or even a developing junior, there's a little bit more probably openness too. Because I suppose everybody wants, at the end of the day, everybody wants a piece of the tour players. They have this idea that that's the, if they can get them to play well, that's their route to success. But in terms of actually improving them, like, again, it's so individual. You could have two completely different players, and one's completely open to everything you're saying, and they're going to take everything on board, whereas others will call you to account. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's just they're just different. And I suppose you have to tackle every person, not even tour player, but every person as you see them. And it goes right down to junior golfers. I have some junior golfers that will hang on every single word, and then others where you'll say something and they'll just turn around and go, no, I'm not doing that. And I'll say, why? And they're like, well, I can't use that on the golf course, so I'm not doing it. And I've had that occasion where, one of my 15, 16-year-old girls turned around and she goes, no, not doing that, just because she couldn't do it on the golf course. And you kind of had to look at her logic and say, you know what, you're probably right. There's no harm in her doing that. So I suppose the difference is definitely the expectation. The better the level they go, the higher the expectation is for delivery and delivery quick. And I think it's fair as well because it's their livelihood. They make their money from the game. They put, the dinner on the table for the family from the game. So you have to bear in mind that when you're making changes, you're not just making changes to a golf swing for somebody to get a little better and enjoy a Sunday round of golf beating their friends. You're dealing with people's lives in it. And I think when it comes to dealing with the best players, I always go back to do no harm. To begin, tread carefully, figure out what they want, make changes slowly, and try and just get them to be fully on board with what you're doing.
Absolutely, some great points in that. I know we've got quite a lot of juniors on the Upgame platform. From their perspective, obviously, in terms of coaching juniors, a lot more is about the development and I suppose putting technical, mental elements in place early. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you kind of teach them not differently, but you can sneak mental elements in without really having to grind on it because there's no scar tissue. So things like dealing with adversity, you don't need to explain dealing with adversity. You just give them a game they're going to fail at probably a lot. So keep going until you finish it. And whereas if you get somebody with, 20 years experience and they have a high expectation that they should finish the game, you could demotivate them doing that. So I think with juniors, they're quite versatile and they're well able to adapt quite quickly. And I think it's much more about setting up environments for them. We love our best ones practicing together, playing together, competing against pros. And, we've been lucky enough that we obviously have quite a few that come down and around, and they're always super nice. Like Tommy played a practice round with one of our juniors in Abu Dhabi this year, and it was just great to see how they stack up. And like I said, we're quite lucky with the pros that do come through. They're all friendly enough to do it, and they go out and play on a Sunday with some of the kids, and they just enjoy their time. So I think they can kind of pick up a lot of things from just doing that. And I think seeing how somebody as organized as Tommy Fleetwood is about the game, they almost look at themselves internally and go, I really don't do enough of that, or they ask questions about it. And I think that's the way they learn the mental skills, is actually from dealing with it and learning how others deal with it. I think on the pro side, probably a little bit more structured and organized and explained, I suppose, is probably the big way. But then once they get into that and they understand that, like, you're not trying to knock them if you do give them a really difficult game. It's about dealing with the frustration rather than necessarily me trying to create it. It's much more about them going, right, it's a hard game. I'm going to have hard days on the golf course and things aren't going to go right and lucky bounces will happen and bad luck will happen. And I've just got to treat things in the same light all the time and kind of just accept that they will happen. I think that's probably the difference in those two kind of players.
Yeah, and I think just to pick up a couple of points, the first one that I love is the game is teaching the player and they're coming up with the answers themselves. I think in this day and age, they almost want everything on a plate, just eat that, and you become better, which isn't, certainly in my experience, that's not how it works. Often it's you create that environment, like you've said, and the player finds their own answers to it. And it might be a different answer for one player to the other. And then the second point, I think, about competing with players, particularly players who are better than you, is massive. If I look at how I grew up, I was at a couple of golf clubs in the UK, was a young, promising junior coming through, like 12, 13, 14. And I was fortunate both clubs had pros. There were some good players playing on Sunshine Tour, European Tour, Challenge Tour. Good juniors who were older than me, scratch players plus handicaps, and I was practicing with those guys day in, day out, putting comps, chipping comps on the course, and you don't realise they're sort of pulling you towards their level. And that's, I think, for any player, even even if you're a mini tour pro, if you can find a practice group where you're competing against guys on the European tour, that's going to pull you along. And you see it in the States with the clubs like Isleworth, the Bears Club. All the tour pros tend to congregate at those clubs, and it's, yeah, they'll do their own practice, but they'll also be playing and competing against each other as well there. So
yeah, definitely. And it's even funnier when you see, you know, the tour pros competing against the juniors, because it almost puts the pressure on them, because their expectation is to hammer them. And we did some Thursdays where we basically made an event. Any of the pros that were here and any of the really good juniors, we called it a Thursday throwdown, and we basically set up a practice challenge or a number of practice challenges and had a way of scoring it, or first one to complete it. And it was funny seeing the pressure that the pros ended up under versus the juniors, because they were just expecting to beat these kids, and then they kind of go into it and they realize some of them are actually pretty good, and okay, this is actually going to be a bit of a task here to finish this game off. And again, it's like you said, creating that environment is so key to developing them right. And then they think nothing of it. Like, you know, if you have 5 juniors who are similar level, you know, they're losing way more than they're winning because there's 4 others that's going to beat them. They kind of get used to, right, I've got to dig deep here and I've got to try and catch so-and-so, as opposed to, oh, well, he's just way better than me. You know what I mean? It's kind of normal because there's a group of them losing and there's one winner, as opposed to, like, if there's 2 juniors and one wins all the time and one loses, they think they can't do it.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's constantly having that level above you that you're working towards. Once you're the best in your group, that's the dangerous time, because you can get comfortable and you can stop that line trending upwards. So yeah, that's really important. And I think it segues quite nicely into how we've ultimately met a lot of through Upgame and the practice app, which we've now got a beta version of, where I know as a coach you can create your games, you can create a group, and within that group there might be tour pros, there might be juniors, there might be club golfers, but they can enter the practice game, create a practice game, enter the scores and see how they're competing against everyone else on the leaderboard. And that's, I think, from a practice point of view, and you'll elaborate on this, but it's giving consequence, and that there's a score. You've got that motivation, but you're competing against people, and you want to be top of that leaderboard, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think it certainly, when we've done it, it's made the practice a lot more engaging. You're not just doing a drill on the range, and you might have a score, but the score doesn't mean anything. It's actually your little league against people. So I know you've sort of used that quite a lot recently. How have you found it?
Yeah, I suppose I've always been super interested in the balance of what to practice and how to practice it, you know. And I go back to the Ryder Cup in France a few years back, and I remember looking at 3 players on the range. You had Molinari, Rose, and it was Alex Noren. And if ever you wanted to see a range of different practice styles, they were the 3 players. You had Rose with an alignment stick behind them, shelling golf balls, like just ball. He must hit 50 balls in half an hour. You had Noren, who was making the wildest, craziest looking, most exaggerated practice swings about 10 times before he hit 1 ball. And then you had Molinari, who'd hit 1 ball every 10 minutes. And it was all set up as in, you know, where he was going, what the target was, what the outcome needed to be. You know, there was a result, there was a score on it. You set that up with Dave Alred. And, you know, it was at that stage that it really, I suppose, my practice, but how do you find the right balance? And that's where obviously it kind of led into scoring. So I always had this idea that I always wanted to build my own app. I just never had the skills or the time or the money to go and do it. And then I came across the Upgame one, and it was ideal. You know, being able to bring together a group of your players who can practice in different parts of the world. They don't even need to be together. You can post a picture with a real simple description of the game and how to score it, and then they can all feed their scores in. And it was like a dream come true. It was just so easy to do. And all of a sudden you can start to prescribe practice. So you can say, right, this week's drill is this, or do you know what, we're going to have 3 games. Let's see who can do the best, almost a capture the flag type thing. And it's really, really good for them to see that, because even if you've only got a small group of players here, you might have 10 guys around the world that I only see every couple of months, but they're all engaging and competing against each other. And they even, from the junior side, they even get to know each other from it, in a real simple way, because they can talk in the chat within the app. And it's been super helpful. And it's one of the most exciting things for me with the app going forward, is that you've actually got a couple of things that you could use just purely on an assessment point of view and see how somebody's game is developing. So you can have a driving game that you might use, an iron game, a short game one, and a putting one. And you can actually use that and say, right, Tom in January is scoring this, and Tom in March is scoring this. And you can actually kind of figure out where to place your time and where to allocate your time based on both that and then the statistics side of the app.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously what we want to do at Upgame, we started off very much heavily in stats, but we don't want to be the platform that just said, there's a load of numbers, off you go. We want to be a performance app where the players are using it and improving it. And obviously we've now got different elements to that. You've got your stats, basic and pro level. You've got the training games, that there's a library of games already in there that we're going to be adding to. Likewise, you can connect to coaches like Jamie, who will give you specific games for you based off the stats, which obviously, hopefully we see you getting better at the practice games. Hopefully we then see those stats getting better as well. And then the third element is partly what we're doing today. We've got some podcasts from guys like Jamie. We obviously had Pewey on last month. We had Dom and Jamie from Lucas's team. And we want to keep bringing these sort of educational performance insights to you, which you can use to get better as well. Because that's ultimately what the game's about. We all want to play better, whether it's Joe blogs on the Sunday morning football. You don't want to be paying for the beers in the bar afterwards, do you? Or if you're a guy at the top level trying to compete for a major, obviously you want to be adding a few of those to the CV. So I think we're getting a really good platform now, which will help all you guys and girls get better, hopefully. And again, if any of you do have ideas on what you might like from the app, who you might like to hear from on these podcasts, do please chime in as well. Touching a little bit on the stats and how you use them as a coach. I know a big thing I always say to people is that the reason we need them is golf is so emotional as a game, and players, and I'll include myself in this, we get lost in that emotion. A number of times you might miss a short putt on the last green, come off and tell everyone in the world that you're the worst putter that's ever played the game. And then you put the stats in and you see, well, actually I was 5 out of 6 from 5 to 10 foot today, which would be very high up on the PGA Tour. So how have you found it with players? How do you use it with your coaching?
I think, to begin with, I think I probably use it differently than most. I think one thing that's always stood out to me is I end up in this field where there's numbers everywhere, from a TrackMan to a swing catalyst to this and that. And I'm actually horrific with numbers. I am terrible at looking at data. So I end up trying to figure out ways to create pictures using these machines and using this data that actually relate to me. And I think it's probably one of the things, after using so many different stat systems, that I like about Upgame, because I kind of have a flow that I work through in my head, which is probably different than most, is I'll normally look, first of all, at the strokes gained. So you've basically got it broken down into the basic different areas. That normally gives me at least a highlight. So instead of me looking at all of the data, which, might as well be a different language, I'll go, okay, well, we've narrowed it down to your putting needs work, or your iron playing needs work. And then once I look at that in a bit more detail, then I can start to kind of create that picture. And if you use like iron play as a really good example, one of the things I like with Upgame is you can go iron play and actually go straight into a dispersion chart. So instead of me looking at 75 to the 100 is this, 100 to 125, and I'm having to think a lot, I'll actually filter it for each distance and go, do you know what? He's missing way too many greens from that distance. And I see a picture and a chart on my head or on the phone. And then in addition to that, I can also spot patterns then. Because really, if somebody tells me that their average distance from the hole is 20 feet on a 100-yard shot, if I have somebody who's 20 feet average, but it's spread right, left, long, and short, that's very different than telling me that you've got somebody who's 20 feet average is consistently long and right. Because if they're consistently long and right, I can plan for that if I'm caddying for them. I can plan for that in their preparation versus if it's, 20 feet wide, long, short, right, and left, effectively that person I have to get to aim for the middle of the green. And it's a big difference in being able to actually visually not only see that, but just show it to a player. And so, look, these are the last 50, shots from 100 yards that you hit. This is where they ended up. Why would you go at a tight left pin if your miss is consistently left? Like, it doesn't make sense. Fair enough on a right pin, go for the right pin, miss it left, but don't go at a left pin. It just makes no sense. I think it's that visual aspect for me is very helpful. And like I say, it's probably a little bit of a different way of going through it than most, but as far as the way I look at it and think about it, it just helps fit my eye. Whereas if you want to go into the data on it, the data is there as well. So if you're probably you're the opposite to me, you probably go straight for the numbers and show me the graphs and the Excel sheets, and whereas I need a picture to understand those big numbers.
Yeah, brilliant. And I like to say, I think there's definite pluses and minuses for both. And obviously, like we both say, when it comes to actually translating the message to a player, you are trying to keep it as simple as possible. I mean, that's ultimately my job with the player, is to look at all the graphs, the Excel columns, rows, and come up with, right, what are the couple of things you're doing well. And I think that's another important thing with stats, is you can really highlight and actually boost the player's strengths as well. It's one thing saying, oh yeah, you're putting well this month, but if I can say, yeah, you're putting well this month, and from 5 to 10 foot you'd rank first on the PGA Tour, all of a sudden you can see them sort of sit up in the chair, and you're not just telling them they're good, you're showing them, look, it's a fact that you put in fantastic. So that's I think where it's good. And then, like you say, with the target dispersions, that is massive for planning your round and just understanding your game. If you look at, I suppose, like the best players in history, they were often probably the best course managers. If you'd look at Jack Nicklaus, if you'd look at Tiger, even Ben Hogan going way back, and probably even like recently now, Colin Morikawa, I think is very, very good at it. And he speaks about knowing his shot dispersions and basically just centering that, depending on the scenario. And I think for even players, if all you did was just put your data in and then just looked at those dispersions, what the biases are, you'd improve very quickly just from picking better targets. I'm actually recording a video on this week to drop into the app, but it's as simple as that. And what you'll find, you will have a bias. It might be long left, it might be short. And once you know that, you can plan accordingly. Something I've seen with, and this includes tour pros, is front pins, how bad players are in the front pin, zap it, right, 1, 2, 5, 5 straight at it. And obviously they'll hit decent shots, like they'll be 15, 20 foot from the hole, but short, and they'll be in bunkers, they might be in water. And that's costing them easy strokes, where if they see, right, well, a lot of my shots are coming short, I'll move my target 4 yards past the flag. They're going to, they'll hit some that go 4 yards past the flag, that, you know what, still a very good shot from that distance, but they'll also have more on the green and their overall scoring will be better. So, yeah, I think it's a real smart way to look at the data.
I think that's a really good example. Like, I noticed it especially in Abu Dhabi this year with one of our juniors, and like I said, he played a practice on Tommy, played lovely golf, everything looked fine. And, you know, the first hole on the first day, he's hit it in the right rough and he's got a tight front right pin. He's got all the green in the world behind the flag. He's a great wedge player, but he's literally probably hit it 2-3 yards short of where he needed to be. So he's only slightly off, but he's now in a bunker short. And likewise on the next, he had a tight left pin, a wedge in his hand. He's probably pulled it a yard left of the pin. And all of a sudden he's bunker. So he's made 2 bogeys from really 2 potential birdie chances. And even something as simple as after we had done that tournament, because it had happened quite a bit throughout the 2 rounds, but we basically went and said, right, well, what is your dispersion from the rough versus the fairway? And he hadn't even contemplated this. He just thought flag, ball, you know, move from A to B. And when we looked at it, like, there was a drastic difference in the amount of control he had from fairway versus rough. But on the day, he just hadn't thought of it. You know, it just hadn't come into his head. But then as soon as he sees some data, bang, you're in there. And it's, you know, even with the Upgame Pro stuff, I think that's the really interesting thing, is you can obviously see the difference between fairway and rough and sand, and you can even plan accordingly. So you might have 3 dispersions from 100 yards. You know, so where's dispersion from the fairway? Where's dispersion from the rough? Where's dispersion from the bunker? And you can obviously play then based on what you're seeing. So it's almost a green light to be conservative, and it's a green light to allow yourself to not have to hit at the flag, because you're basing it on fact. You're effectively the card counter at the table in blackjack. You know what I mean? You're not just doing it because it feels good. You're doing it because you go, okay, well, if I do this 50 times in a season, that saves me strokes. Maybe not every time. Maybe there is the one occasion that it doesn't. But actually, if I do it consistently enough and not emotionally, then straight away I'm going to be saving strokes and I'm going to shoot better scores.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, again, that I would say all levels of players are poor at, is that the moment you go into the rough, hitting the green becomes a good shot. If you hit the green out the rough, even from 100 yards, the likelihood is you're going to be gaining strokes, unless you hit it to 60 foot, obviously. But even then, you are better being 60 foot on the green than 15 yards in the face of a bunker. So I think just those expectations, that picking better targets, and it's easy wins. Like if someone listens to this and they go out and play this afternoon, you can start picking better targets. Obviously, if you see something technical, you need to change your golf swing. That can take time to change and bed in. So the little easy wins, and this is, I think, what you see the best players in the world are very good at. I mean, Bryson DeChambeau, obviously, he's got a lot of press recently for length. If you analyse his US Open performance, he did a number of things well that went under the radar. Yeah, he hits it a long way. He also hit more fairways than the field average that week that didn't get talked about, so he was pretty straight with that length. He also, if you looked at how he hit his shots into the green, he very rarely missed. We class it as a hard miss on the Upgame Pro app, might be short-sided, difficult up and downs. He was avoiding them. He was hitting it to the fat parts of the green. He was hitting it to the safe side where he knew he could chip it close, and then he holed out very well. And that's, again, barely got any press coverage, but that's the guy who's won the US Open has probably plotted his way around the golf course better than most people that week. And yes, part of it did involve smashing the ball a long way and straight, which him and Matthew Wolff both did. But there's a lot more to it, and that's a lesson anyone can do. And golfers in general, we are more aggressive than we should be. And it's, I think, just thinking of it, if you hit 10 shots from this position, what would your outcomes be? Rather than just thinking about, if I hit my best shot from this position, what would the outcome be? That's a good way to think about it.
You see it a lot with golfers who are developing as well. Like when you do technical lessons with somebody and they've made an improvement, like let's say somebody who goes, right, I want to break 90, and they come, and you know, I always remember I had one guy a couple of years ago, and he had come and he was working on his swing for nearly a year, and like the swing got so much better. He'd stand on a range and he looks like a single figure handicap, and his score improved, but like nowhere near the extent that his swing did. And I'm looking at him going, there's something majorly wrong here. I said, right, let's go on the golf course. And I watched him for 3 holes play, and he was basically trying to take on the same shots as me. I said to him, right, well, if you want to break 90, let's break this down into 4 tasks. I said, first of all, like on par 4s, can we hit the ball 180 yards in play? It doesn't need to be on the fairway, it can be in the rough, but like as long as it's lying okay and nothing's obstructing you from the next one. Second shot, can you get it inside 50? Third shot, can you hit it on the green? And then fourth shot, can you 2-putt? And I basically said to him, what we'll do is we'll have 4 rows on a scorecard, and it's just a tick or an X. So can you do each task? And obviously he starts breaking these skills down into his head and these tasks. And what he quickly noticed was like it only took 1 good shot in the hole to make a par. So like that could be he's hit the driver, 200 and laid up to 40 and then hit a good chip. Or he's hit it to 20 feet and hit a good putt. And the scoring difference was amazing. And so a couple of days later, he had like just a members competition, and he texted me after. And he basically said to me, he goes, guess what I shot? And I optimistically thought, well, he sounds happy, 85, 86. And he goes, 79. And I'm like, you've skipped the 80s. And I'm like, what happened? And he's like, well, I just kept leaving it in easy places. And then there was a couple of par 5s and short par 4s and par 3s that I hit the green on, just hitting at the middle. And yeah, he said, I just basically kept doing that. And he said, like, it's amazing to see when they simplify the task and they actually take away the highlight reel from their head, how many shots they can save. Like it's very rare I see people losing strokes from being too conservative. It's more when they start going at flags, and you think, especially a high handicapper, if he goes at a flag with a 3-wood and he leaves himself short-sighted, it's only going to get worse from there. Whereas if he lays up with a 7-iron, chips it on and 2 putts, on a hard hole, he's taking a 5 all day, and he's, 1 good shot, and it changes everything.
Yeah, that's a classic case, isn't it? You see, it's so easy to lose strokes than it is to actually gain them. And in the scenario I always talk about, if you find yourself in a recovery position, so recovery, that might be in the trees, that might be in a fairway bunker where the lip's a bit substantial. How many times you see poor players try and take too much on, hit the face of the bunker, balls back at the feet, there's a shot gone. They're in the trees, they think the sevy, they hit a shot, they hit the tree, they end up back where they started, they realise they're not sevy. Or if they don't, they try the same shot again and they lose 2 strokes. Whereas you just chip outside, yep, you're going to make a loss because of your previous shot, but you're not compounding that damage. And that's where the doubles, triples come from. And they're what wreck all the scorecards. It's interesting, like about the highlight reel. Like I've just finished a report for Keir Island a couple of weeks at PGA Championship, and there's a video of Rory's final round there. Now Rory won by a number of shots there, so he was playing unbelievable golf. And this video shows every shot he hit in the final round, and you will see quite a few bad ones in there and this is a guy who was best player by a mile that week, one of the best who's ever played the game. Yeah, we have a picture in our head that to break 80, to shoot 70, to win a tournament, you've got to play perfect, flawless golf, and that just doesn't happen. So that'll be an interesting watch just for people's expectations. I can't think what the name of the video. If you type Rory McIlroy final round Keir Island into YouTube, that will come up, and you'll see that he's hit some poor shots, but he's managed those well. He's hit it to the sort of fat part of the green, short of some back flags, etc., and ultimately won by a canter. But I think just expectation management is huge in golf, and that's sort of what we're trying to hammer home here, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it'd be an interesting one to add up the amount of strokes gained on TV coverage in a tournament versus the rest of the field, because you literally are watching the best shots played by the best players who are playing the best that week, and you're not seeing that many of the bad ones. Like, unless it's a pivotal moment where somebody's leading by 2 or 3 and they 3-putt, generally they don't show it. You just see the bogey appear on the screen, and you're seeing their rip drive up the next because they're angry and they're flushed at 330 down the middle. So we just have this idea that like the pros just do this all the time, but actually we're literally just seeing the best of the best that week playing their best shots. I think it was interesting looking at the Augusta app or the Masters app this year, because you could literally see every shot with a Pro Tracer. And if you look through that and you went down the leaderboard, you could see some what looked like horrendous golf shots. But these are the best players in the world, and it's just telling people that it's okay to actually hit these shots. It's not the end of the world as long as you manage it well and you kind of know where the trouble is and you can position it in the right place rather than hitting a terrible shot and it's out of bounds because you went for it over a corner. I think there's a different value to every result.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think there's been some absolute gold in this podcast today that hopefully people have got the notebook out and wrote down some of these ideas, but definitely that using the app to understand your shot patterns, giving yourself the margin for error based on what those shot patterns are, and look that can change. If you're Zach Johnson from 100 yards in the fairway and you're my dad from 100 yards in the fairway, sorry dad, but you can have different tolerances. Obviously, Zach could land it on probably a 1 yard slab of concrete. I've seen a video of him doing that. So he can be more aggressive. Whereas if you're not, give yourself that margin for error, get it on the green to start with, get it close second, and you'll accidentally get close as well. The way shot patterns work, you'll have some that go close to the hole, some that don't. But if you think about it in terms of if you hit 10 shots from that position, what your outcome would be, center that shot pattern, that will straight away bring your scores down. I think the second part is about the practice, trying to find people who are better than you, practice with them, compete against them, hopefully use the Upgame training app with your coach to do some games that are good for you, and keep that improvement cycle going. I think we've covered quite a lot there. I'd like to thank you, Jamie, for your time today. I know it's busy over there in Dubai, but some fantastic insight for the listeners this week, and look forward to speaking to you all again. Cheers.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks a million.